All right, in this video, we're going to start looking at blood vessels. Take 2 videos to do that. So this one actually does mean something because there will be a part 2. And so we're going to be looking at blood vessels in general and then go into the particulars concerning them. So here's blood vessels in general. Blood vessels, basically a delivery system of blood to the rest of the body. It also works with a system called the lymphatic system, which we will talk about in a later unit, to return and to circulate those fluids back to the bloodstream. And blood vessels, there are 3 different kinds of blood vessels. There are arteries, and the best way to remember this is arteries carry blood away from the body. So artery A, away A, that helps you. And so you can see here there's arteries, and there's lots of different kinds of arteries doing but they're only doing one thing, not lots of things. They're carrying blood away from the body. And then there are the capillaries, and the capillaries represent where gas exchange is happening. This is where direct contact between the blood vessels and your cellular, your tissues and all your cells happen, and they directly serve the cells. Think of the arteries and the veins as transport. Think of the capillaries as actually doing the work, the circulatory system. And then the veins are what return blood to the heart. And as you can see, it's like a tree. They get bigger and bigger as they get closer to the heart, whereas arteries get smaller and smaller as they get further away from the heart. It kind of makes sense. So blood vessels in general have 3 layers in their wall. First of all, the middle section here where the blood goes is called the lumen. And the lumen can be big or small depending on the type of blood vessel. And the walls of the blood vessels are laid out in 3 layers. Capillaries, not so much. You can see capillaries here just have this kind of one layer of thing, but these arteries and veins have 3 layers, and here their names are. There is the tunica intima. Intima means like close, and so think of like intimate or close with the blood. It's the inner layer, so it's the inner layer that's touching the blood. It is continuous with the inside of the heart, and so it creates this continuous, smooth surface, no friction, because there's a bunch of stuff that's having you travel really high speeds to get to all the parts of your body to do the thing. And so that's that's the tunica intima. Then there's the tunica media, which obviously this is the middle section. The middle section is mostly composed of smooth muscle and then sheets of a fiber called elastin, which I bet you can just tell me what elastin does because of its name. It has this elastic kind of stretch quality to it. And the tunica media's main job is to vasoconstrict and vasodilate. Vaso has to do with blood vessel, and constriction means to get smaller, dilate means to get bigger. And so these smooth muscles work directly with the nervous system in order to dilate your blood vessels if you need more blood, or to constrict your blood vessels if you need less. This is the biggest portion of blood cells, our blood vessels, and this is obviously the purpose of these tissues is to maintain blood pressure and to keep everything going. And then there is the tunica externa. It's the outermost wall. Externa should make sense. It's composed of mostly like collagen fibers, like connective type tissue, protect the wall of the blood vessel. They reinforce the wall, kind of anchor it to its surrounding structures, so keep everything hanging in the right place. And then there's this section of the tunica externa called the vasa vasorum, which, as you can see, they're tiny little blood vessels inside the blood vessels. So the question of who's feeding the blood vessels is answered here. If you ever had that question, that would be a weird question to have, but there it is. And so the tiny little blood vessels feeding those bigger blood vessels. And so now let's talk about arteries in particular. So here are the arteries, and there are 3 different kinds of arteries. And there are elastic arteries here at the top. And I like this little chart right here because it helps you just kind of see how they're made up. The elastic arteries, obviously their name gives them away. They have a lot more of the elastic tissue than the other arteries. These are the arteries that are closest to the heart. And so like the aorta is an example of this, that is right there. It's the first blood vessel that leaves the heart that goes to the rest of the body. It's the largest blood vessel in the body, the aorta. And it's so what's the purpose of all this elastic tissue and not as much smooth muscle as the other ones? It's to keep that thing intact. It maintains a high pressure, and it has to be ready to receive this high pressure that's coming directly from the heart without busting, which would be horrible, obviously. And so that elastin kind of provides this continuous pressure and continuous flow of blood going out from the heart, even between heartbeats, which is important. The next is the muscular arteries. And again, their name gives them away. As you can see here, not as much elastic tissue, but a whole lot of smooth muscle. And so these muscular arteries, their big job is going to be vasoconstriction. When they constrict, they are what are causing the blood to slow down if that's necessary. It would increase pressure, but it would also slow down the flow. So you can kind of understand just from, if you have a water hose and you squeeze the end off, it increases the pressure, but it slows the flow. So it makes sense. This is usually, this one obviously has the thickest muscle in it. Most of the arteries in your body are here in this muscular artery, like all the named arteries in your body are represented here. And then the last type are the arterioles, and just as their name seems to suggest, they are the smallest of all the arteries. This is kind of when you're getting closer to the capillaries. They contain the smaller ones don't have all three layers, but the largest ones do have those three tunica layers. And the smaller ones just have a single layer of smooth muscle to kind of control the flow. And their big thing is they are the ones that lead into the capillary beds, which we'll talk about capillary beds in the next video. And so they can directly control the flow between the arteries and the capillaries, which again, the capillaries are kind of the business end of the circulatory system. And so if blood flow needs to be controlled, a lot of that is happening here as well, directly between the arteries and the capillaries, keeping that blood out of the capillaries for whatever reason the body would need to do that for however long, depending on, usually has to do with some sort of homeostatic thing that's going on, or it can dilate, particularly think of like a stress situation or like an adrenaline situation. They would dilate to increase the blood flow. So I think you understand how that works. It's just some sort of homeostatic function that is requiring the change in blood flow.